Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Ready?
Yep. Let's go. Let's laugh. We are imperfect after all.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Imperfect Us podcast.
I'm Leanne Camilleri.
And I'm Lisa Downs. As hosts of the Imperfect Us podcast, we share relatable stories that celebrate we are all perfectly imperfect humans, leading perfectly imperfect lives. We discover practical and evidence-based strategies that draw on the science of well-being and positive psychology that help us to uncover the barriers that might hold us back from being our authentic selves and turn them into opportunities so that we can show up more consistently, doing what we really aspire to do and who we want to be.
We acknowledge the Wadawurrung and the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of the beautiful lands on which this podcast is being recorded. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend this respect to other First Nations people who are here with us today. So, let's get started.
Hello everyone. In today's episode, we are speaking with the incredible Dr Maxine Therese, who is the creator of Childosophy, a complete philosophy of the child, as well as a healing system and a therapeutic approaches to children's well-being. Maxine has an unwavering focus and deep passion that has resolved around nurturing the boundless potential within children. From a tender age, she harboured an intimate desire and a dream to become a doctor of children. After the passing of her sister, Maxine's perception of life changed, compelling her to embark on a quest to comprehend the essence of the human soul. Maxine's doctoral studies introduces a groundbreaking theory that reimagines the children as an integrated entity encompassing body, mind and spirit. Super excited to find out more about this amazing work. So let's dive on in and talk to Dr. Maxine. Maxine, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure for us.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Leanne, for having me on your podcast to talk about my passion, children's needs.
Oh, we're really excited to hear about this. Well, we might start off with that then. So we would really love to hear a little bit about what led you to do the work that you're doing with children, but also with families and teachers.
Yeah, thank you. I guess in a way, I talk about it and I write about it in my book as well, The Push for a Child philosophy, that I feel that I've always sort of been pushed in a way to understand myself, my own self-understanding has sort of really been about what my childhood was. So as an adult, thinking and reflecting on my childhood, but also when I became a mother, realising that how we are to understand children really didn't seem to fit with what I was told, like what I felt about that and what I felt children represented as souls and what their potential was as human beings didn't seem to fit with some of the ideas and I guess family patterning or conditioning within society. So I've always really been interested to explore the life of the child, I guess, and it was definitely in mothering that I realised that there's something happening for our children that we need to really support in different ways, perhaps, than what I was able to find back then. Both my children are adults now, so I have two adult sons, one 30 and one 28. So it's been through the process of mothering them that I've realised that there's so much about childhood that we leave behind or we don't pick up clues about in our broader lifespan perspectives. I just think that the child's just such a beautiful being, but also to study the child in the theoretical sense, I couldn't find it. I just could not find it anywhere in a way that resonated with me, which is what led me to do my research and study. And then just sort of in my own journey with my children, realising things that were occurring for them and watching patterns, but also working in the Australian education system for a while as an integration aid, realising that the gap between what we were being told the child does versus what I was seeing and witnessing unfolding really with children. So that really, I guess, having my own children led me to that, and then watching them go through different education systems, kindergarten and then school, realising that, and working in the school, that the maps and the models that we had for children were a little bit limiting, and we didn't really speak to the essence of who they were. We were still seeing children from a dominant adult perspective. telling children rather than letting children reveal, I guess, to us what they needed. So it's been a journey.
It's a fantastic journey. Reading your book and your resources as well has really resonated with me highly and aligned to a lot of the things that I also see that you've noticed, that the children do reveal a lot more than adults often don't see until they're actually finding that space, I guess, to watch and see and to communicate really well with the children about what's coming up for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
That feeling understood piece is so important. Often, you can walk through the corridors of an educational setting and hear the way a student is being spoken to, and not always is it in a way that is allowing them to express their experience. Often they might be being reprimanded or being told what their behaviour is. We're really curious to understand, what have you discovered about what children really need us to know?
Yes, I love that.
I love that too. And I think too, Leanne, just listening to you with that beautiful observation, like children are told a lot, they're really told a lot. They're given ideas about themselves from the adults and, society around them in the educational settings. And it's not always a true indication of who they are. And they sort of start to develop their own identity based on that. And I think what children really need from adults, or what children really need us to know, is that they are able, competent and capable, and that given an opportunity to express in a mode or a way or a language that actually resonates with them, then they'll reveal so much about what they need. But we as adults and caregivers and teachers of children really are called to explore why we're projecting, or why we're sort of so quick, I guess, to sort of relate to children in a way that doesn't open them up, that can close them down, or can sort of have a preconceived idea about them. And I think in light of, it's such a big question, because I believe what children really need us to know is that they are souls who have within them everything that they need for their perfect self-development. And if we trusted that, and we knew that as caregivers and educators, then we would sort of open to understanding that if they've got a behaviour, or if there's something that we might deem is not appropriate, or if they're having difficulty learning, then we can look to why that's not happening, rather than saying that they don't possess that. So it's really about knowing that if they have these nascent capacities that are going to come forward with the right environment, then it really is up to us to offer an environment of openness, which is sort of about really in a way, like, it's funny because you can talk on quite a few different levels, but in a way it really is about opening them to keep their nervous systems balanced, ready and receptive, rather than closing them down so they become combative and fighty, and those behaviours sort of present because they're not being recognised as sort of maybe needing a little bit more time, maybe needing to have an understanding about something else that's going on for them. So I think children really need us to know that they have everything they need. And if they're not developing in a way that we would presume they should be, that there's an unmet need. Mm-hmm. And if we can identify what that unmet need is, then that actually helps their nervous system reset and re-establish so that they can actually take the next step. So it's almost like just knowing their greatness in a way. They need us to know how great they are and to relate to them from that position, not to treat them as though they're less than, to sort of have that reverence or respect, I guess, for the child.
I don't know if that that is amazing. Yeah. I've sort of have almost felt that's really important for the adult, I guess, who's also supporting the child, to make sure that you've got that safe space. And I know we'll talk about your foundational model shortly and the needs, how we might support those unmet needs moving forward.
It's beautiful. I think just sort of going back to the first question you asked, was when I became a mother that I realised that my children were triggering things in me that weren't theirs. So when you talk about parents or teachers or adults meeting the child. I didn't realise in my early mothering the degree to which our children bring forth our unprocessed emotional life. Yeah. And that was a really big part of my research and my work, was really having a way of speaking to that, because I saw it and I was watching it happen, and I was really good with other people's children. And then when I had mine, I noticed that there was little triggers that I was having that I certainly wouldn't want to have, but they were arising. Mm-hmm. And I was really curious to ask questions of myself in that respect, like, why am I getting so upset about that, or why is that triggering me? And then when I was doing all of my research, I found a man called Lloyd Demas, and Lloyd Demas spoke about the idea of it's actually genesis of the self. There's a whole lot in my book, and my research talks a lot about this, but he talked about the idea that when we become adults, we spontaneously regress to the age of the child. So this was really pivotal in regard to my research, because I guess when I was researching and I'd found Demas's work, it was sort of in the early 2000s, so around about 2005. 19 years ago. And it was sort of hard to bring that idea forward within the psychological models that we had, because it was like, what do you mean that we're carrying this inherited past? What do you mean the child's bringing forward something that happened to the parent? Like, how do you actually explain that? Fast forward 20 years, and now we know about epigenetics, we know about inherited trauma, we know about the way that biological memory gets stored in bodies, so we know all those things, but we didn't know it back then. So when I found that research of Demas's, it was pivotal for me, because it's like, oh yes, what if we could say that this is happening? What if we just take that as a given, that this guy's done research for a very long time? He's actually passed away now, but his research was very important to mine. That if we're around children, we're going to regress. We're going to bring forward all of the murky stuff that we didn't get as kids, that we didn't have met as children, that we might vow to be a better person around children, but sometimes when we're in the company of them, they'll bring out our shadow, or they'll bring out the aspect of ourselves that we would rather hide. So it's really important for all adults, I think, to be aware of that. And then it just sort of lets you take a breath and go, okay, so it's not that there's some dynamic here that can't be fixed or helped or supported. It's natural that my children are going to bring forth anything that's not my greatest, so that I can start to work on that for myself. And then if I can do that, then they're free to be themselves. But what we tend to do as adults, and we see it really commonly, is that we might expect our children to do what we can't do, or be who we can't be. So we put extra pressure on them to achieve, excel, do well, because they've got a better opportunity, or we might sort of have all these narratives that that's the reason that they should be doing that, without looking at developing ourselves. Because as you say, Lisa, it brings up, how do we do that? How do we find our centre around children to support them and give them space? And mostly it is about understanding and knowing ourselves. So it's really important that we as human beings have an understanding about our own emotional life, the way that we react, the things that trigger us. And that's hard when you're actually in the actual physical space with children. So it's really important that we learn these things, I guess. That's what I love teaching people, how to do that together, how you might do that for yourself whilst you're in this situation with children or supporting children to hold space.
Maxine, I found myself reflecting as you were going through that. I was thinking, oh, yes, I can, align what you're saying to different times in my parenting, and it's more common than we think.
Absolutely. And I think too, Leanne, when you can laugh about it, like I really think, I just think parenting really is such an aspect of who we are as human beings. If you are a parent, and, there's lots that are, but if you aren't a parent, you've been parented. So it's really important that we understand that this is sort of a natural thing. This is going to happen. This is actually, your children are going to bring out the worst of you, even though you vow that you're going to do the best, which was definitely my intention. And then you get an opportunity to really look at it in a way and go, wow, if this is actually what's happening, how do we work with it rather than fighting that we're right and they're wrong, or they don't understand us because they didn't have the parents we had and they've got a better experience, or whatever it is that we justify in our parenting moments that we're not proud of. And it does, it triggers stuff, but we're all human and we're all on this journey together. And I really love that our children give us an opportunity to go deeper with ourselves and say, wow, you are struggling with that subject. I struggle with that subject. So instead of me projecting onto you that you can't do it because it's not in the family and don't worry about it, you can do something else, I might pause and say, why did I struggle with that subject? And if I had have had a teacher who understood me, or if I had have had a bigger frame or a map to understand that concept, would I have really struggled? And then we almost look to ourselves first before we put any extra additional stuff on our children. But that takes time and practice, I guess, because, there is that, oh, don't worry, you won't be able to do that because I never could, which is really just us as adults projecting our unhealed or our unrealised potential on our children, rather than being curious and saying, wow, you're struggling with that subject. What do you need?
Yeah, and such a beautiful, compassionate strategy in working with young people.
And the importance of what you were saying there, Maxine, about the curiosity. So curiosity, if we're stepping into that lens of curiosity, so much easier to show your children as well that we're always learning. We're not perfect. We're imperfect, amazing humans, and that's okay. But to be curious of, wow, where did that come from as well, for ourselves to be able to process it and to speak it out loud. Why did I do that, like you mentioned? And, opening it up to, oh, well, mum's a failure too. Oh, that's good. Now we can work that together.
So I had have known when I became a mother that my children were going to trigger anything in me that hadn't been resolved, I might have been a little bit quicker to work out that I didn't really have to decide anything for them when their behaviours were triggering me. I just had to get curious, and I had to really explore. Rather than say to them, why are you behaving this way? I could then look and say, what is their behaviour triggering in me? And might they need something through that behaviour? So really understanding that the child's behaviours are always expressing something important to us as their caregivers. And it's our job to discern what that is until they're old enough to do that for themselves, which is sort of happening quicker than ever these days. But then how might we meet them with that behaviour? So looking to what the behaviour was indicating about their unmet need, and then asking them simply, what do you need? Yeah, what's going on and what do you need? What's happening for you that this is occurring? What do you need? And I love how parents and people will often say to me, oh, my child would say that they need something extravagant, like an iPad or a this or that, but mostly it's an emotional need. And mostly it will be something like, I need you to listen. I need someone to stop doing something to me. I need more time to get something done. Generally, it will be an expression of need that helps us as a caregiver to understand that we can support that without actually projecting or putting our story on the behaviour.
That's such a beautiful way of giving, the child autonomy in being able to do that, but also self-awareness, like developing that self-awareness in what it is that they need. I know that they do often feel it and know it, but to be able to use the language of it to share with an adult who's a supportive adult is such a great resource to have.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think too, on reflection, as Leanne was saying, and you said too, Lisa, that it sort of triggers things for us as caregivers, basically about our own childhoods as well. And if we had have had that autonomy or regard as children, how might that have felt for us, which is sort of a big part of my work, is helping to bridge the gap between our unhealed childhoods and taking care of children as they grow. So how might it have been for us if someone had have said, hey, Maxine, I see that you're having difficulty with that task that I've set. Is there something I can do to support that? What do you need? Rather than, oh, you're so slow, or what's wrong with you? You haven't got that yet. I've already explained that 5 times. And do you know what I mean? Like, it's like all of those things, I guess, that we sort of react with, that we use language we use without really considering the bigger picture of what impact that's going to have. And then sort of the child will then regress or not respond, rather than, you know, if you see a child struggling, it really is beautiful just to say, is there something you need? And they might just tell you, which is really beautiful.
Sometimes they definitely do.
To open. Some might take a little while to open, but I think that's our task, to soften them up, open them up.
Yeah. And to hear them. And like you said from your book about, you know, what children really want us to know. It's really, really important. Yeah. Speaking of that, in your beautiful book, The Push for a Child's Philosophy, and what children really want to know, you uncover the foundational needs model that has stemmed from your PhD, obviously. Are you able to share a little bit with our listeners about how the foundational needs model came about, and also some of the successes that you've been having with that as a result of your amazing work?
Thank you. Yeah, the foundational needs model is, I guess, the progression of my thought, you know, like as I said before, mothering and being in education system and going back to university after both my children were at school, and I'd been working as an integration aide, thinking we need a map and a model that's bigger than sees the self bigger, not deficit models or developmental models that didn't see the full potential of children. So I looked at all sorts of philosophies and psychologies, and I looked at all sorts of worldviews to understand the human self. And I was really delighted when I explored further, because I'd been doing yoga for quite a few years before I had children. So it's been a big part of my growth and development to incorporate, I guess, a lot of the Eastern philosophies. So I wondered, and I actually studied Eastern philosophies and ended up lecturing in world religions, which was a wonderful topic to study and teach others about as well. But I really was sort of on this idea that I felt that the chakras were the most comprehensive map and model that we had of the human self, because they incorporated the body, the mind, and the spirit. Now, the chakras in Western academic circles 20 years ago were a little bit out there, and it was hard to bring them into a Western knowledge base in a way that was recognised. But as I said earlier, you know, that was 20 years ago, and lots of things have changed. And I'm really delighted that my foundational needs model, which is actually based on the chakras, forms a beautiful needs model for children that helps us to identify their biological body-based sensory development. It helps us to identify their mind, brain-based, cognitive, rational developmental phases. And it helps us to identify their spirituality or their spirit, which I call their actions in the world or their behaviours. So I really was so curious to explore the idea of, what if we saw this map of the human self that's been in Eastern philosophies for 5,000 years? And what if we were to use that as an energetic map and model of the child's growth, which is what a lot of my research actually was focused on, finding the epigenetics, the quantum physics, the science behind why we would use an energetic map and model of the self over and above the models that we had. But what I found too with the foundational needs model, using the chakras as a map or a model for the self, that all of the other things that we knew about child development, all the other things that we knew about the self could be actually integrated within that model. And that was really exciting to me, to think that all of the developmental things that have gone on in the past, it's almost like we didn't have to say they weren't important, we could say, oh, that's where they fit. Like a lot of the attachment theory all fit within the bigger foundational needs model under the need to be safe and secure, and our bonding and our relational aspects of our human self and what they might look like. And then if we didn't have that safety and security, then we'll have these imbalances occurring in the self. So the chakras became a really important map and model for me to research in light of children's needs. And my PhD actually presented the foundational needs model, which is the chakras, as a workable needs model for children's wellbeing, which I was awarded for 11 years ago, actually. So, yeah, so that was really important. So in the time since getting my thesis, my doctoral award, and now in that time frame, you know, I really have been working with the model in lots of different ways. I've obviously written my book, but I was using my methods and methodologies before I had my doctorate as well, which actually allowed me to have such confidence in the map or the foundational needs model, because time and time again, I saw whatever was going on for children could be sort of beautifully adjusted somewhere within this greater map, this children's voice in life and helping them to express themselves, you know, all sits in with the need to speak, which is one of the needs. And if children have got power struggles or there's oppositional defiance in a classroom or even with adults, then we could look to the need to act, which is that another aspect. So the 7 foundational needs, which align with the 7 chakras, became really the map that allowed me to then look at all behaviours, common issues, family patterning, any of the theory that we've done developmentally within the fields of psychology or philosophy, and sort of do a little bit of an overview and say how the map would be really helpful for us to understand children. And then, of course, I've seen obviously years of success with clients and children and teachers using the system. Yeah.
And you're exactly right, Maxine. Excuse me. I work at a school who a lot of children have been using your child psychology and the wellbeing cards and etc. for a couple of years now, which has really helped me with my interest in the work that you're doing. But also reading your book and then your extra special book of the journal that you've created, the Wonder of You book, just helps to bring different ways for different students to bring one of those chakras alive. And I just think that's fantastic. And I've seen and heard that being taught from a child's perspective to another child, whether it's their peer or whether it's their, you know, someone they're collaborating with. And I think that that's so important, that you've been able to, your philosophy and your model is so strong, but also that it's having a ripple effect outside of those little people that you're working with. It's getting further out, which is wonderful.
Oh, I love that. And it really does make my heart sing, because it's almost like when my children were little and I was looking at the things they were doing, I noticed that the patterns all sort of revolved around themes. And then when I went to study and realised that we needed a bigger map, and perhaps the biggest human map energetically that we had were the chakras. And, you know, as I said before, that was hard because 20 years ago, it was really, you know, it was really hard to put an idea forward such as that didn't really have the science base. But now that we know that the nervous system is so important with regulation and how we understand our human development, well, the chakras are actually our nervous system. And we could say that this is the need of the nervous system, or the needs of the nervous system, which is actually what's happening. But it was really important for me that children know that they have these needs. And so once we meet those needs, as you said, once you see children talking about their safety and security or their need to act as their autonomy and having freedom of expression, you just start to see a change in how they feel, not just about themselves, but the world. So their whole nervous system really does adjust in accord with this idea that if there's something going on, then they can just look to the need. And once they understand what that is for them, then they can work through it, or they can have someone help them to work through it, which is what the resources do with the journal and the cards. And also I have a program called the Pure Wonder Program, which is a mindfulness, movement and meditation program that we do in class format, and the kids just love it because they're learning about themselves. So when we actually want children to learn, it's so important that we actually, there's this whole, engaging the learner and helping them to be part of it, but helping them to understand their bodies and how their bodies work in conjunction with their mind, or how their feelings work in conjunction with their thoughts, means that they've got a resource inside them that they can draw upon. And it sort of hands back a little bit of, I don't know, it's like it just gives back, I say it gives back to children what's rightfully theirs. It sort of hands back the authority to them over their own feelings and thoughts. But of course, we've got to feel that we can do that for ourselves as well, that we can have an understanding of why I felt that way, why I'm acting that way, what's going on. But the needs model is great for adults and children to learn together, which is wonderful.
Yeah. I love that it empowers that insight to self. It's incredible to see a young person start to understand themselves, and I can see how beneficial your tools and strategies, your lovely model would empower them to do so. Maxine, can you share your insights in how we can use your resources and tools and your beautiful foundational model to better meet children's unmet needs and develop more emotional awareness in others?
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Leanne. I think the best place to start for anyone, whether a teacher, parent, anyone really interested in working and supporting children is, and I come back at all the time, is to know ourselves. So the needs model helps all of us understand, and I'll just tell you what the 7 needs are. And as I do, you might just feel for a minute where you sit on this spectrum of, whether you think you've got those needs met or whether there's sort of a little bit lacking, because it's really beautiful, because then you realise I might start there. Does that make sense? So it's like it always starts with us, but we've got these 7 foundational needs according to the needs model. We all have a need to be safe and secure. We all have a need to feel that we can have emotional freedom. We all have a need to act in accord with our own direction. We all have a need to love and be loved. We all have a need to speak and be heard with our voice or other modes of self-expression. We all have a need to see and visualise ourselves and our lives and the world that we live in a way that feels aligned with us. We all have a need to know that we're connected to a greater source of energy or a greater world that's supporting our growth, that we're part of something much bigger. And when we have those needs met, when we know what those needs are and we feel into our life, we can sort of go, oh, I probably need a little bit more voice. I don't speak up as much as I could or whatever. So it's really about just firstly knowing that there is this needs model and that the needs speak to a different aspect of our humanness, but they also are integrated. So they help us understand what's happening in our body, which is what the journal does. It's got beautiful little images of our biological body and the different correlations of the body to that need. So with the need to speak, for instance, we'll see that there's the thyroid and the thymus gland and different parts, our teeth and our gums and all those different parts of our body attached to that need. So then we can really engage with children and start to look at the things that are going on for them and say, I wonder if that's your need to speak. Do you want to say anything? Have you got anything to say? And they get really curious. Like they'll come out with the most amazing things. So I think for me, awareness is healing and self-awareness is absolutely dynamic. So giving children the gift of self-awareness to be able to have the needs model available so that if they've got something, they can get curious and go, I wonder if it's that, or I wonder if it's that. And as the adult supporting the child, they don't really have to know anything. We want to be in that curious, beautiful, I call it being in the question. We want to be in that wonder with children where we're like, what do you think it is? What do you think might be happening with that stuttering? Or can you tell me what might be happening with the cough? If we don't want to get too hypervigilant with all the things that are going on with our children, but the more they learn about themselves, the more we can pay attention to everything. But to start with, we just want them really to understand that there is 7 needs, that they have associations with our body, they have associations with feelings and emotions. And once we know what those associations are, we can meet that need pretty quickly, which rebalances us. So I talk a lot to children about the seesaw of balance and how our needs at the center point. So if we feel safe and secure, or I'll use the example of our need to speak again. If we feel that we can say what we want to say to someone, we'll have a good need to speak. It'll be balanced and our nervous system will know that we can speak. If we're deficient, we might have mutism. We might actually stutter. We might hold back. So a child that does those things, we can see they're tipping off on the deficient side of that need, and we could build it up, or we could do things that help them to do that without focusing on the behaviour. So we wouldn't focus on the stuttering or the mutism. We wouldn't bring that. We would just encourage more expression, and we might do it in ways that weren't just verbal expression, or we might make noises, or we, depending on the age of the child, we might just let them know that it's okay to speak in some way. And if it was excessive, we might have a child who sort of doesn't stop asking questions. Like it doesn't matter how much you satisfy their need for asking, you can't do that. So it's like, well, that's an excessive need. And nothing's right or wrong. Like the deficient needs or the excessive needs, they're not right or wrong. It just means that they're going to not support the best flow of energy in that child to be their best self. So we just want to bring things back to balance, and it's not about being the same as everyone else. It's just about attending, noticing the behaviours and looking to what need we might cultivate so that the child sort of won't get caught on holding back or won't get caught on talking too much and the other kids go, we don't want to talk to you because we can't get a word in. Yeah, so we really want to bring little bodies back to balance. So knowing about the needs, having access to the resources, which sort of are pretty self-explanatory. I don't know if you see that too, Lisa, with the cards. Like once you start using them, you'll find your own ways, but they all centre around the 7 foundational needs.
Totally. And I think one thing that I noticed when I've used the cards with some of our students, depending on who they are as well. So some are very, very good at sharing their thoughts and feelings straight away. So for me, it was very easy to have lots of insight into what their unmet needs were and what they needed. And then there were other students who just, were developing slowly their language, but that was okay as well. But I found them very useful, and they became very good at choosing the card that was exactly right for what they needed for their unmet need at that time. And I really love that in all of the work that you do is you talk about when we're imbalanced and how to rebalance. And I think, that seesaw metaphor really is helpful for students, children, anyone, adults as well, for us as well, to be able to say, I think I'm actually out of balance at the moment, and what are my unmet needs here? Because interestingly, you talked about speaking. So I have a thyroid issue, and I often think about the unmet needs that I have. And as I've learned more and more, I've been able to speak differently in different contexts, which I'm really proud of.
I love that because, I believe too, that it's sort of we're all seesawing, and we're always moving, from imbalance back to balance. It's sort of life does that in each stage and age you go through. But I believe that the things that we struggle with, and I've seen this time and time again with children and adults, is generally where our gift is. Mm. So if there is that issue with the throat and thyroid and aspects of that development, and maybe holding back from saying what we need, or trying to find the right audience for our message, or just even talking to others about the things that we love, generally there'll be a perfect message for you. Now, it's going to be different for everyone. This is the beauty of it. But when you start speaking in generalized terms like that, like everyone has a need to speak, And if there's a thyroid issue, it generally is the body saying, and I love animating body parts. It's part of what I love to bring play with to children. And it's almost like if your thyroid could talk, it would say, well, when's it my turn?
Mm.
Yeah. So then we might go, where in your life are you feeling that you want to speak up about something? Or are you always speaking on behalf of everyone else and not yourself? Or we might ask different questions, and the curiosity just grows. But I think knowing that map is so helpful for everyone, because you just go, oh, yeah, that means that to me. And what I've found over time, which is why I love the foundational needs model so much, is that I talk in terms for children too that all bodies need. And it's a beautiful way of talking to children. All bodies need to feel safe and secure.
Totally.
And if they don't, they're going to do this or that. So they need to feel what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel unsafe. Yeah. And then when you say all bodies need to speak and be heard, and if they don't, they might close down, or if they don't, then they might be talking a lot so everyone hears them. What's happening for you? Because all bodies need to speak. Yeah. And then children just soften that, do that. And it's like all bodies do. So then you can sort of start to enter a beautiful inquiry for them. What about your body? Tell me what your body needs. And it just gives them that authority to start to speak about not all bodies are the same either. So then we can start to really introduce beautiful concepts like just because Sally feels that way doesn't mean that Ella feels that way. What do you feel, Ella, about that need? And you sort of get a richness just from using the resources and talking in that way. But yeah, I think to answer your question, Leanne, because it was a long-winded answer, but to answer it, it's like we need to know if we knew the map. So what my aim was and what my vision has always been is that we just see things from the highest possible potential.
Yeah.
And I looked for that. And I love the idea that we could be the best that we could be if we had the right soil, which is very Platonic. Plato tells us that we don't really need to do much. We just have to plant the child in the soil that's right for them and watch them, really unfold. So I was always thinking, what is the best, the highest map and model? And it was through the chakras, through the Indian chakra system that helped me go, okay, so this is what they believe in the East, that if we cultivate these energy centers, then we become godlike. And we become our best selves. We become a true expression of our soul in this human body. And I really like that. And kids love that too. Yeah, so it's like you just have to listen to yourself. You just have to understand if you're struggling with something that we can support you by understanding what that need is. And then when we meet that need, that frees you to be your best self. And it's not going to be the same as Sally, or it's not going to be the same as Fred. Yeah, it's going to be yours. So what is it for you? And then helping them to develop that self-awareness that just because you're doing it, it doesn't feel right for me. So I love that more than anything, is that it established sort of, even though it's a model and map that applies to all bodies, it's very much a model and a map that helps you attune to your body, which is going to be different to everyone else's. Yeah.
It's the empowered self-awareness that provides a pathway to your uniqueness.
Absolutely.
And imagine if we wind back the clock for all of us.
Yeah.
Imagine if we had have had that when we were a child.
Yeah.
How better the world would have already been, because we had that literacy to help us through, and the knowledge and the map and the model.
Well, I think it's really beautiful, because I think it can start now with us as teachers, parents, caregivers of children, grandparents, wherever people are on their journey with the little people in their lives, and really open to the idea that what comes up in me as a resistance to see the child in that way, and can I develop that? Can I start to shift? And often you'll find that children do that, because as I said to you before about Damas's work, when we're parenting, we regress to the age of the child. So anything that's unresolved in our histories will come up for review. So we're offered an amazing opportunity to grow and expand with children. It's like we get a second chance. But a lot of the time we're sort of wounded with our own stuff that we don't see it as an opportunity. We see it as something that we get stuck on ourselves. So I think our children are I think we all come in knowing our greatness. And I think then it's about the people that we come in contact with that either support that or deny that. And yes, I think you're right. Imagine if we as had open, that you are a soul and you actually should trust yourself first, even though I'm the adult and I'm the parent. I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to trust yourself. And we haven't really known how to do that in a safe way. And I love that about the foundational needs model, because it doesn't mean that children do whatever. They get taught beautiful self-awareness so that they know that their actions have an impact on everyone else. They know that their security might be something that has been passed on. So if they've got anxiety, that we can look at not just what's happening in their life to feel unsafe or insecure. We can look at what might have been happening in mum and dad's life or grandma and granddad's life. So in a way, we're really looking at harmonising so that everyone has these needs. And if grandma and granddad didn't have them met, then they might be a bit grumpy because they didn't have that experience. But how do we help ourselves to understand that we're here now and that we carry that experience and that knowledge with us to sort of make the world a better place? And I think it's really empowering to give children the right to own their own feelings, thoughts and behaviours. And I think it is time for us to really look at how might we support that, given that we mightn't have had it ourselves or our parents didn't know how to support that.
Yeah. And they only learnt from their parents. So, that's the ripple effect. Yeah. Oh, I'm loving this so much. I was just thinking, in some schools, we now talk about what we can do when our learners are feeling out of balance. And there seems to be quite a lot of discussion about, after COVID and et cetera, what that might look like. Do you have any tips that could really help us to share with our audience a little bit about rebalancing our children and ourselves, I guess, as we navigate those big emotions that come up for our little ones?
Yeah, I think we're in fascinating times, especially, with the way that we have had such a change in the way that we do things, schooling and homeschooling and back in school, and now children with anxieties, it's really hard. There's a lot going on for our little ones. There's a lot going on for everyone. But our little ones really do pick up so much because energetically they're very open. So part of the appeal for me to use the foundational needs model was the fact that it really accounts for the sensory body and the feelings that we absorb from others and our environment. So we're sensory beings, and a lot of my research in the book talks about the studies that I did to sort of argue the point that we come into the world integrated, body, mind, spirit. We come in integrated. Our sensory body actually prioritizes how we interpret the world until we learn language, which is then how we really come to describe our experience through language. But sensorily, we're picking up all sorts of information, emotions, feelings, cultural language. We're picking up everything through our senses. And if we're wanting to rebalance a body, then we need to have sensory rebalance. We need that sensory feeling that I'm safe and I'm at peace in my body. And that's not always easy to do in a classroom. And it's not always easy to do if everyone's heightened. And it's not always easy to do if everyone's at a different sensory level. So Arnold Jessel was a psychiatrist. I refer to Jessel in my book because he said something really beautiful. And I remember when this is before we had all of this nervous system regulation stuff. It was before we knew so much about what the nervous system and the importance of regulating that did to a human body, mind, body, and spirit. He said that when we're looking to support a child to learn or in a learning environment, that we can never expect a child to learn until its nervous system is ready. So if we're wanting good outcomes and we're wanting more balance in a group environment or even in a family, we have to look at why there's an imbalance in the first place. But we would get overwhelmed if we sort of just looked at it that way, as in what's happening, why is this not going right, what do we need to do? We might get more heightened, like we might notice that our nervous system just gets more dysregulated. So really establishing patterns of opening, softening, and really, I guess I say that the nervous system's open, receptive, and ready. This is sort of how I describe the nervous system to people. It's either open, ready, and receptive, or it's closed, combative, and resistant. So if we think of it in that way and we know that the nervous system's got 7 needs, then I'd be really interested to know, are those needs being met in the learning environment? And how do we get back to being open, receptive, and ready now? So sometimes music, sometimes movement, sometimes meditation, sometimes a hug. Sometimes, I know that's a bit of a tricky one now in schools too, I understand. Sometimes just a kind word or an activity or a way of connecting, sometimes a story. Anything that's going to make us open, receptive, and ready, where we're not demanding anything. So I think that's the quickest way to rebalance. It's almost like you need to bring someone back to a regulation, and we have to do that if we're guiding others. Like, we have to learn how to do that for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I use the word peace a lot. Like, I like to feel peace in my body. And that feels particular for me. So when I say that, I've got a meaning to that. So you might just set up, establish, or start to implement language in a way that the children, like, what makes you feel relaxed? So you might establish that as a groundwork, and you might get a word for each child. One child might say, when I'm in bed, or when I'm having a hug, or whatever, like, what makes you feel that? So we might get a word. So just say, for instance, most of the class felt that peace was a good word, or relaxed was a good word, or whatever. We might start to include that and say, let's get back to our peace. Let's get back to our feeling of being comfortable, or whatever it is. And then how might we do that together? And so you might need a minute, like there might be 3 minutes where children are all saying that they need something different or whatever, but you'll eventually come to sort of, it's almost like a level, or I like to think of those builders' measurements, where you get a level. The seesaw thing, you want to come back to a level so that from there you can all come together again, because when things are up and down or seesawing, you're not going to come back to balance. So even just holding that in mind and helping children to understand that is really important. So it's like, let's come back to balance, and even saying it, but it's got to be a shared meaning of balance. Does that make sense? So you've got to attune with the kids and get to know what balance means to them. When do they feel balanced? What do they feel in their body? And you can get there pretty quick. I know some teachers that are pretty magic. I love the hand claps. Some teachers are pretty amazing. The minute they start clapping, kids are like, right, stop, whatever. So it's like finding your own way for you, but knowing. So again, I just love the idea of it's all about knowing and having self-knowledge that we all tip off balance, and that when things are tipped off balance, all we're really wanting and needing is to come back to balance. But we might seesaw for a bit too, and that's okay. When we're seesawing or watching someone seesaw, we need to see where we're at. Yeah, so taking a nice breath, telling your body nice things, like, it's okay, we'll all become balanced soon. Yeah, everyone gets unbalanced. Yeah, so finding ways to really self-soothe your nervous system so that you can meet others from that state, because we all become imbalanced.
It's a beautiful practice of self and co-regulation.
Yeah. Because I always love, and this might be something that's helpful for your listeners as well, because when you're in a caring role, you are thinking a lot of the other. And I really love to make sure everyone's included. So I include little Maxine.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
She didn't get what she needed. No one helped her to know how to regulate. So I've had to do that. So when I do those practices, I'm coming home to me. And it's really beautiful. It's like everyone needs to be safe and secure. Everyone needs to feel balanced. Everyone gets imbalanced. Let's try again. Yeah. So that's what I would have needed. So it's like at the same time, this is a beautiful thing about our consciousness or our awareness. When we can develop our awareness, we can go a bit deeper. So that's my practice, is that I like to think about what other people need, but I also like to remember that I would have needed that too. Beautiful. And how do we do that at the same time, which is really beautiful because you can feel it. Yeah, we all know what it feels like to be around someone who knows how to calm themselves. We all know what it feels like to be around someone who doesn't know how to feel balanced. Yeah. So
I love that, Maxine. When you were sharing that story, I was thinking of my classroom last year in particular and how good our students were, or the children, but in designing their own what that calm looks like as part of our routine that we would have all the time. And they would draw pictures or took photographs. They chose their own sort of way of presenting that and then sharing it with everyone. And we did that together. So it was a collective. But what I found fascinating out of all of them, the rocking, and so the hips in the book, especially, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, is that became the rhythm because it actually, and everybody, so once we were trying to get back into balance, it just became slower and slower, and people did it differently. So some people would stand up and rock, and some of the, particularly the girls, the mothering girls, would actually just rock their baby, which is rocking themselves. And it was quite fascinating that became a regular. And even when we weren't in a group, anyone who needed to get back into balance, you could see them just either on their, wherever they were. Yeah. Some would just, be a bit more rhythmical. It was just beautiful. But having that collective understanding.
We all know what we need. We do. We all know what we need.
Yeah.
We just need an attuned environment that helps us to remember what do you need and what might work for you. And then a few suggestions, like what about this, what about that? And you'll see them soften, So instead of fighting, it's like if anyone's fighting, it's because they're not feeling balanced.
Yeah.
So those behaviours. And then with the needs model, you can go, is it their need to act? Do they feel restricted or controlled? Is it their need to love? Do they feel hurt or wounded? And so with the process of doing my research, I was really interested to correlate and collect. I've got a whole beautiful list of things that happen in bodies when those needs aren't met. And so when you know that, and when children know that, they can go, that might be this need. I had a little person the other day that I was talking about the needs to, and we were talking in light of a particular circumstance that was happening for him. And he said to me, I think I'm two needs at once. And he was really beautiful because he could tell me that he had this need to be safe and secure, but he also had the need to love. And we started this beautiful conversation about what if you're all the needs? And he was like, that's too much. And I'm like, is it? But what if we all? And it was just beautiful. And I think we need to give them back this map that says you are great. You have everything you need. And if things are not balanced or feeling good, or you've got stuff going on, let's work it out together. And then you'll know how to tell me what you need, which gives them a lifelong resource. I've got, my children are both adult men now, and we know life brings imbalance and we have to rebalance, but the skill and the emotional vocabulary, the articulation with expressed feelings and what's going on in a body, it serves you in any endeavour. And it's almost like it's more important than subject focused stuff, because you pick that up anyway. It's this inner world that we're really longing, all of us, to understand more about, because when we feel peace, when we feel balanced, everything just flows from there. And I think we're sold a bit of a story that we're actually getting somewhere, that we have to get somewhere in life. And it's wonderful to have experiences. You grow and you have all these beautiful, like you said before, Leanne, that from that point you can move beyond, and you can really start to enjoy and have a lot of joy in your life. But we sort of get sold that the child grows up and they've got to get to here. And then if they're not there, they've got to get to there, and they're not there by then, and then they're got to have extra help or whatever. And it really does inhibit so much of their self that we'll find later on in life you have to go back and rebalance. And I think the wonderful thing about life now is that we sort of all have that opportunity, but I'd much rather support them to be integrated and whole from the very beginning, so that when they grow up, whatever that is, when they get to be on their own out in the world, taking care of themselves and being responsible for themselves and the world, that they sort of don't have as much healing to do as perhaps the generation before, that they're a bit freer in their body and they feel a bit more peace in their life. And that takes a beautiful expression in the world. And you really see people giving so much more when they've got more to give, when they're not trying to make up for what they didn't get or they don't have.
I love that.
Yeah.
Maxine, our cup is so full, I think, talking to you today. I have learned so much. So thank you so much. What I'd love to know is, besides your own fantastic work, which of course we will be sharing in the links to in our show notes, is there a book or a podcast or TED Talk that you'd like to recommend to our listeners today?
Oh, I love it. I love that in life we get to stand on the shoulders, I guess, of those that have been brave enough or have really paved the way for new understandings. And of course, in my book and everything, I talk about all the people that have come together to help me with my work. But one of probably the most important books or people for me in the last few years has been a man called Mark Wolin. And he wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You: How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. And it's a bestseller, but it's a mind-body look at the way that we use language and how the words we use and the language that we use as human beings it comes from a long line of inherited experience. But mostly he talks about it from the trauma lens. So as you girls mentioned earlier about trauma and the idea of, how trauma-informed stuff is sort of really apparent in the nervous system, I feel the needs meets that. But the one thing that I always struggled to find evidence for when I was doing my thesis, and certainly not in the last, probably 10 years, it's been much easier. But Mark Wolin's work really helped me to, I guess, what supported me, because I'd already had these intuitions because I was seeing them in clinic and I was researching with the lens of quantum physics and past life research and inherited trauma. But his book really helps everyone, and it's practical because he's got exercises and there is YouTube stuff on there as well. As in, he's got a lot of things on YouTube that help you understand that the things you say and the way that you feel about yourself and the world mightn't have started with you. They might belong to a parent or a grandparent, and he gives lots of wonderful examples about how that happens. So I do that with children, but I think Mark Wolin's work's really great for that self-development that we need to do as adults working with children, to understand that we might have felt something or thought something or said something in the past that we had no idea why we did that. And Mark Wolin would say that you need to look at who else in the family has said that or done that or felt that way, and then you'll get to the inherited trauma that lives within the family line that keeps repeating. Yeah.
You reminded me of something through stuff that I was doing around unconscious bias, and, that idea that, who's sitting next to you when you're forming an opinion or saying something. Is it a dead uncle or grandparent, that unconscious little person on who sits on your shoulder? Just made me think about that.
Yeah. Well, it's really beautiful because for years, and a couple of the case studies that I use in my book talk about children that carry the memory and feelings of their grandparents. And it's really interesting because we sort of in the past, and that's why my map model was so important, to account for this whole self that knows things that we need to be curious about and ask questions about, because we can shut children down when they come out with something about feeling a certain way or having an experience that you like, well, you didn't have that experience. Like I remember, when I was this age and that happened, and as a parent, you might say, no, I don't think so. But if you inquire and go deeper, you might find a link between what your child's expressing and what's happened for a distant family member or something like that. So it's becoming much, much more accepted through epigenetics and through, I guess, quantum theory too, in a way that, and my soul theory, which I present in the book, that says that we are on a continuum and that we carry the past within us. So our biological bodies aren't just present moment. They're not like I was born in 1968. My body doesn't have just information about the year on from when I was born. It actually predates me. All of my ancestors' memory, feelings, emotions, and information is in my cellular body. And how I respond to the world is going to be based on my past. So we draw on all sorts of information to understand ourselves in the world. And children are just so beautiful with saying, but grandma told me that. And it's like, but grandma's been dead for 20 years. And she goes, I know, but she comes to me in my sleep. Or I just know because I remember what it was like when grandma was little. There might be something that helps us to bridge the gap between how do we actually form our feelings and thoughts about the world, and how do we help children understand their feelings and thoughts about the world if we're limiting them to this or to a way of understanding them. It's not the reality, because they do have access to all sorts of amazing information. And my research was definitely interested to look at that. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I thinking that way? And where did it start? And that's what Mark Wallen's work does, is it sort of helps you to track where it started for you based on your own language and the way that you talk about yourself in the world.
I'm definitely getting that book. I saw that the other day and I thought, oh, what is that? Anyway, I thought I'll wait. But no,
so good. And it's on audiobook as well. So it'll be good.
Perfect. Got another new one for that. Thank you so much for that, Maxine. That's amazing.
Welcome.
Oh, I get to go into the next one. Sorry about that, Leanne. Maxine, we always ask our guests a little bit about what's your favourite, usually a wellbeing practice or a tip or a strategy that you love to do for yourself that you can share with our audience today that might help children as well, but doesn't have to be. It could be parents, children, whatever. That's something you love to use.
Yeah, thank you. I've got lots. I've got so many. I think what I mentioned before about showing compassion to myself, watching how quickly perhaps I am to not be so kind to myself and flipping that by seeing my little self in there somewhere, like, oh, would you talk to little Maxine like that? No, you wouldn't. So, a lot of people think I'm funny. My children actually think it's very funny that I talk about myself in third person. They loved that when they were teenagers. Mum, stop referring to yourself in third person. But I find it really good to distance myself, because I think we get so caught up in things. So a mindfulness practice to me is always about remembering where I am and who I am. And sometimes for me, it's about just catching a moment where I can breathe and just be happy to be in this body and to be me and to be kind in that. But also that comes that didn't just happen automatically. It comes from, I guess, practices. I love prayer. I love journaling. I love reflecting. I love gratitude. One of my favourite practices, actually, now that you've said this, is just making me so happy. My surname is Therese, and I was born Maxine Therese, but obviously I had a surname. And over time, I've sort of culled and cut things off and reshaped and reformed. And so my surname Therese is actually my birth name, but it was after St. Therese. And as a little girl, I loved St. Therese, and she had a gratitude practice that I did for many years. And I don't do it every day anymore, but I do it occasionally or quite regularly. So she had a little set of beads, 10 beads, and each day she would find 10 things to be grateful for. So bringing gratitude into my body, we now know the science behind that. We know the neuroscience about how much gratitude changes the chemicals in our body, and it just really perpetuates wellness and well-being. And I write a little bit about that in my book, In the Need to Love. But I love that because it just sort of reminds me, one, it connects me back to my heritage, which is the reason that I was named what I was, but also that I had an affiliation with St. Therese as a child. But this idea of counting 10 things that I'm grateful for means that in the present moment, I remember, I guess, who I am, that I have all of these things, that I have air to breathe and fresh water and a loving family or a great relationship with my children or whatever I'm thankful for. And then that just brings me home. So I think, again, based on the idea of my whole research and study has been like, we don't really get anywhere. We do. We have all these wonderful experiences and we go through this time continuum. We all have a lifespan. But for me, just being at peace in my body and how do I find ways to come back to that, and being grateful is definitely one of them. So I hope that helps your listeners.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And I know that you've got an experience in the Wonder of You book for the students that can do the bracelet.
Yeah, actually the gratitude beads are in there.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a really, really good concept, I think, for everyone to be mindful of and do that differently too. Might not have to be 10 for this.
It could be other things. I mean, St. Therese, they were gratitude beads for her, but it could be something else. It could be best friends. It could be, it could be anything. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
And you're welcome.
Yeah. I'm going to call you Therese.
A lot of people do. I don't mind. I answer to both.
Maxine, thank you so much for your time today. I have just learned so much. I feel like I'm walking away empowered with some wonderful strategies, and I hope that our wonderful listeners are too. We are, of course, going to share all of the resources that you've shared with us today in the show notes. But for those who are listening, where is the best place for people to find out more about you and the incredible work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. Thanks, Lisa. I first need to say, thank you. I'm always humbled and I'm so grateful to share. I think that we're all ready to go deeper with ourselves, and thank you for letting me have this time, with you girls today. I really enjoyed it. You ladies, I should say. I have a habit of doing that. I see all the little people. Just really loved sharing, so thank you. The best place to find my work is through Childosophy, so www.childosophy.com. I also work and pretty much reside out of the Pure Wonder Soul studio in Geelong, but the website childosophy.com will take you to all of the different parts of my work. I have an audio book. My book's coming out in audio version soon, so everything will be on the website. If you go to the website, from the website you can access to the studio, but you can also access my practitioner trainings. I do teacher trainings. I do parent trainings. So it's all there on the website. It's probably the best place to find anything. And I love to, help others and support others. So there's some resources on there that you can download as well. But all of the things that I sell are on the shop there as well.
Yeah. And I must admit, I've been on the website a lot and there are so many resources and so many courses that you can do and some wonderful things for students and parents to be a part of in the training, but also just to get their, understanding of what's going on and what you have. The offerings that you have are incredible. So it really is changing worlds. So thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's been an absolute inspiration to hear from you directly and see the you behind some of these books and some of the work that you're doing. So thank you, Maxine.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. It's been delightful. Thank you.
Wow, what an incredible conversation.
Yeah, there is just so much in that conversation that I really loved, particularly her foundational needs model and how you can incorporate that to really explore the unmet needs of a child, but also for you as a parent or a teacher as well, to try and work out how to best approach, I suppose, children and how to support them in a much more balanced way. I think that was really good. And I suppose the next part for me was the difference between imbalance and balance, and that metaphor of the seesaw that we're trying to get back to balance. And sometimes we can be in the deficit model, or we could be more towards the excessive. And, when we have that seesaw, we're so out of balance in either way. But when we get back to that pivot point, that's more important.
And I love how that seesaw can help us, help the student, but also, the adult in that self and co-regulation, which is so important in education settings.
Yeah. And what about the importance of that language that, they're learning about themselves and what's going on in their body, and then being able to articulate what's going on for them and what it is that they really need us to know about so that we can help support them. Or they can just tell us what it is that they need, that they have got the capabilities there. That's really important.
Yeah, and I think that is making it safe for them to be curious about their experience.
And also that they already know it probably, but if they're not going through a process to help and support them, how do you know what safety and security means? What does it mean to express yourself in feelings and so forth?
Yes.
So we have a model that's actually, and like she talked about the map of the chakras, that whereabouts in your body is this information coming from, to be able to express so that we can understand what your unmet needs are and how to support them.
It's like the importance of that, the other. In so many of our conversations, in whichever context we look at it, the importance of the other is always there, isn't it? And in this particular concept, it's holding a safe space so they can explore and understand themselves and enable us to understand them too.
And having that environment where the adult and the child both feel safe and secure and calm and balanced, relaxed. I think that's really important. I do want to share this with you, Leanne. It sort of sums up, I think, a lot of the things that Maxine was talking about. And she has a quote in her book. And it says, if we are truly to support children, we have to listen to them and learn that their behaviours are not problems they're to be solved, but rather they're about what they need.
Oh, I love that. Wow, I think we'll end on that.
We hope you all have an amazing week. Wherever
Bye for now.
Take care, beautiful. Bye.
And thank you for listening to the Imperfect Us podcast. As always, we are extremely grateful to our executive producer, Brenton Ainsworth, for helping us to put this episode together. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone you care about, and we would be grateful if you could rate this podcast on iTunes. To continue the conversation and see what we're up to, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Just search for Imperfect Us. Bye for now.